QRIDA, or formerly QRAA. We're a specialist provider of government financial and advisory support to rural and regional Queensland. And I guess our raison d'etre is to increase the sustainability and profitability of rural and regional enterprises. Another key role that we have is to restore businesses following significant natural disasters, and I'm hoping that I won't be dealing with one of those in the next 24 hours or so, although I've already had a couple of rush meetings about a few bushfires that are around. And I guess we're very much about doing more for our traditional client base and expanding our service offering to rural and regional industries. So if we look at the current rural finance landscape, up until 2011 we were undertaking rural debt surveys every 2 years, and then for a couple of reasons, partly because some of the banks didn't want to play ball, but there's a number of reasons, those rural debt surveys stopped. And then after some state government review around the state of rural debt, then it was deemed that a rural debt survey was a good thing to have again, and so we've just conducted one in the last couple of years, and presented it mid-year this year. So our comparison is really from 2011 to the end of 2017. So unsurprisingly, I guess to everyone in this room, farmers do fund their businesses through debt. That was certainly deemed. Most of the bank lending accounts for 95% of that rural debt here in Queensland. We, QRIDA, we've got about 2% of the rural book, so we're not the biggest show in town by a long stretch, but we've got a couple of significant areas that we operate in, and I'm going to touch on those. So what did the rural debt show us? Well, it certainly showed us that total debt had increased, but only by 1.6%, up to 17.2 billion in that 6-year period. The number of borrowers had increased by 16%, but then the average debt had dropped slightly. I guess there's a couple of other things that were clear. In that period of time, and certainly by the end of 2017, farm management deposits had continued to ramp up. And if you look at the scenario of the last 12 to 18 months leading up to that end of 2017, yes, we had dry times, but we'd also had historically high beef prices, and we've actually had seen people, as they were destocking, actually making very good money as they reduced their stock numbers. So we've seen debt paid down in a number of places, or funds set aside into our farm management deposits. So I guess there was a feeling from some in the political sphere that rural debt was out of control. The debt survey would suggest otherwise, that it's very much business as usual. But of course there's always swings and roundabouts, and it depends which industry you're in at any particular time. If we I mentioned the beef prices. In addition to that, we'd seen particularly good horticulture prices, and we were still experiencing good sugar prices at that point in time as well. Sugar's a different scenario today as we stand here. So I guess you could break up what we do into 3 key areas. We've got that productivity and diversification, so that's where our sustainability loans and our farm management grants have a role to play. I'll touch on those briefly. We've got our next generation and family succession, so we've got the First Start loans, farm management grants, and we've got farm debt services. So we're now legislated to oversee the farm debt mediation process here in Queensland. And that's it's a minor area if you look at the overall number of producers in the state, but it was deemed to be important to have a legislated framework and to bring all rural lenders under the one umbrella to give a clear pathway for debt mediation to occur. We've also got farm business analysis assistance, which is an independent assessment of a rural enterprise that may not be travelling so well. So we've been promoting that, for example, amongst pork producers at the moment. I think Bruce touched on it in his speech. You know, in effect at the moment, just about every pig being sold is going for about $50 less than cost of production. So our productivity loans. Last year we lent 100 million. The maximum we've lent is 120 million. The government's given us 100 million again to lend under these loans this year. We were able to lend to 228 primary producers, Queensland wide. Unsurprisingly, the biggest chunk, the industry that got most of the money was beef. It is Queensland after all, and there's a lot of beef. So 58%, or 2/3 almost, of our loan book went to beef producers. Sugarcane was the next biggest at 17%. Grain and livestock, I think my background is actually wool trading and processing, and I've been involved with sheep for a long time, so I think someone just put a sheep there in that graphic just to appease me, which is nice. And then we've got other crops and small crops and fruit. So, but we do lend across all agricultural sectors. So we've actually seen a spike in assistance to the nursery business, for example, this year. We're always doing something in aquaculture as well. But, you know, if you actually look at aquaculture per se, it's a fairly profitable business, and maybe not necessarily the space we need to be in too often. So in the 20 odd years since 1994, since we've been in existence in one form or another, we've lent over $1 billion. The current loan book's $750 million. The average payback of our sustainability loan, or productivity loan, sorry, is around 12 years. So that includes CapEx as well as property purchase. So our first start loans, one of our key products. If one of our main reasons for being is to get young people into agriculture, and that's where our first start loans play a role. So last year, almost 2/3 of the money lent went to first start applicants. That's 109 approved applications. The youngest person that accessed one of those loans last year was 22. The year before that, the youngest was 18. And the average age of these applicants is 36. So these loans are for buying into the family partnership, perhaps buying your first farm that may not be viable in its own right, because we will certainly lend on a stage progression. The critical thing is that the applicant has a clear plan as to how they're going to be a full-time primary producer in the next 5, 10, 15 years. Off-farm income is a positive, not a negative. So one thing I'd say about our loans, we like to say it often, don't self-assess. Yes, there's a number of guidelines. We're there to help you through those guidelines. But if you're going to borrow money, you need to bring something to the table, and that generally means some equity. But whilst our guidelines talk about 50% equity, that can normally be watered down quite a bit on the basis of experience and off-farm income. We're certainly happy to expand current non-viable properties. So, for example, we've got a client in the Bundaberg region. I think he got his first start loan at the age of about 21, about 18 years ago. I think he's accessed, it's not perfect, but he's accessed about 6 of them in that period of time. And now at the age of about 39, he's full-time viable, not working off farm, and developed a farming enterprise that stretches across sugarcane, avocados, macadamias, and some other crops. His goal was very clear, his passion was clear, his drive was unwavering, and he used that off-farm income to get himself where he is, but we were able to assist him on his journey, and it's just a great story. I should touch on the 18-year-old that got a loan 2 years ago. I'll acknowledge there was certainly mum and dad support, because mum and dad were graziers out Suratway. But he started breeding cattle at the age of 8, I think a gift of about 10 cows from Granny. And by the time he was 18, he had 500 breeders. So he had something to hang on to. And again, passion with a capital P. So, so we were able to help him into some land, but I've got to acknowledge mum and dad were helping him with that adjustment for a period of time. But you don't need to come from a farming family to be able to access these loans. We've got plenty of people that don't. Also touch on our sustainability loans. So the sustainability loans are for existing full-time viable primary producers. When I say full-time, there may be some off-farm, but basically you're deriving the majority of your income and spending the majority of your time on the farming enterprise. And I won't go through these too detailed, but in effect, probably the area that we've moved away a little bit on these is property purchase. We will do property purchase, but I guess particularly when people talk to their bank about loans or talk to their bank about getting a loan through QRIDA, some bankers will say, you have to be knocked back by a bank to come to us. That's not true. We're not a lender of last resort by any stretch. But the guideline does say you need to show some financial need. Now, in some parts of the country, that's pretty easy. Let's face it, we're changing our number plates to the disaster state. So, people have been through tough times, or they've been through drought, or they're still in a build-up stage, or there's been, partnership rationalisation at some point. So there's a number of ways to manifest financial need, but you don't need to be on death's door. You don't need to be knocked back by the bank. But in that property purchase space, I guess one thing we want to work with the banks. We don't want to cut across the banks. So if that property purchase is a nice to have, not a have to have for the enterprise, that's probably something for the bank, not for us. Capital expenditure stuff, on the other hand, our bread and butter. So our growth business has been exclusion fencing pretty much throughout the state, and we can talk about whether it's wild dogs or other things, but make no mistake, whether you value a roo at 0.3 of a dry sheep or 0.7 of a dry sheep, you get 10,000 off your place. You're carrying a lot more cattle or sheep. So, and certainly we've seen exclusion fencing bring sheep back to the state to a small degree compared to what Queensland was previously. We'd love people to access these loans for more water efficiency and energy efficiency, and a lot of people complain about it, don't always do something about it. So I'm aware that there's another energy audit coming. I think QFF have identified about 200 properties they're going to work with for energy audits. So if you're involved with that, certainly look at our product to give you a concessional rate to get up and running. Whether it's any tech stuff, and I know Bruce was talking about greenhouses and that sort of development. We've funded a number of those in some of the agricultural areas. The payback term is pretty quick if they're done right, and one of our case studies at the moment are actually heritage tomato producers in the scenic rim that we were able to help double their capacity, and they've not looked back. We can also finance downstream processing for farmers. So, for example, people that have gone on and dairies that have decided to go and bottle their own milk or make their own yogurt, we've been able to finance that next stage of the supply chain. Briefly, the interest rates are concessional, can be locked in for 1, 3 or 5 years. And current 5-year rate's 3.81, not 3.814. That's clearly a typo. That's very specific, isn't it? There's no fees and charges, and no penalties for early payouts. So, if you find scenarios changed, or you want to go, you're talking about moving to another bank, and they've come up with a keen rate, buy and pay us out. We're happy for you to keep moving on. The repayment terms for the loans can be up to 20 years. There are interest-only options. Guidelines now talk about 5 years interest only. Unless you're putting in macadamia or avocado trees, you're not going to get 5 years. We'll talk about 1 or 2 years. And the beauty of it is, should a flood or a drought or something else come along, or where you need some cash flow assistance, that's when you can put your hand up and ask to tap into that interest-only period that you haven't already used. And we're very happy to do joint financing with commercial lenders, particularly in that first start space where the property might be too big for the next generation. So mum and dad are using bank lending to fund their part, and we're funding the next gen. I'll just touch on family succession very quickly. We've got farm management grants at the moment which provide a rebate for advice on succession. Now I've had a few professionals tell me that they provide the advice for nothing, they only charge for the doing. That's terrific. That's almost philanthropic. Unfortunately, this is for, and I'm not looking at you, Ari, it wasn't you. Might have been some of your competitors, but not you. But this is for the advice. So, to date, we've been able to approve over 900 grants for $1.6 million. And so what it is, everyone around the table obtaining advice about farm succession is eligible to apply for a rebate. So even if you're the eldest son that's gone off and made a fortune in, information technology or something and never want to be part of the farm, but if you're part of that discussion around succession, you've still got a seat at the table, you can still claim. So you don't need to be the person moving onto the farm to get that rebate. At this stage, it finishes on the 30th of June. So up to $2,500 per person around the table, which is or up to 50% of expenses to $5,000. We're very hopeful that scheme will continue beyond the 30th of June. But that is what it is at the moment. I think it's interesting that the average age of the primary producer applicant is 63. The average age of the relative applicant is 41. That clearly shows that we're not doing very much business in the sugarcane industry because succession for them is I'm 85 and I'm now talking about handing it over to my 60-year-old son. So we've still got a gap, and that's to do sugar. So a lot of grazing going on here at those sorts of ages. I can only tell that joke down south. I'd be run out of town anywhere else. Just very quickly, because we do want people to really... Another example yesterday, our regional area manager from Rocky rang me with a bit of a state. Someone's insisting on applying for a $2 million loan, first start, to buy a place, and they've got pretty much nothing to their name. And all he could say was, I thought you guys wanted to help people into agriculture. Well, there's a bit more to it, and that's why we've got this available on our website, and just getting people to even just think about what you're going to do if you're borrowing money. So, and I'm sure most of this room's already heard it before, but anything you're doing, talk to your financier early, take them on your journey, make sure they're part of the deal. Cash flow is king. We still find a lot of people applying for first start loans don't have a great handle on debt servicing. And particularly in the beef industry, I think we've still got some challenges for young beef producers, and it was terrific to hear what Phoenix are doing. And I've got benchmarking down the bottom there. I just love more people to benchmark and understand their business. But sometimes in some parts, and certainly not here in the Downs or even the Maranoa, but some of the beef industry is big hats and bull dust. It's all about having as many cattle as possible without really knowing your market. Well, if you're going to borrow money, you really need to know your market, and you need to understand your cash flows and how everything's going to work. Know your statement of position, and what do you bring to the table? What's your experience? It's not just passion. What else are you bringing to the table? One of the best uses of First Start we've seen, again, sorry, I can't believe I'm using so many sugarcane examples. I mean, it's just a grass, it's not that hard. But in and around the Mackay area, we've done a lot of First Start loans. You know, probably 70 to 80% of the loans we do in Mackay, which is one of our strongest areas, have been First Start. And they're guys buying non-viable cane farms, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 tonne cane farms. Dad might be a cane farmer somewhere up the road, but these guys have gone and got a job in the mine. They've saved their money. They haven't gone and bought a jet ski and a Maloo ute and show nothing else for it. They've actually got a passion for ag, and so we've been able to fund them into that first place, using their off-farm income and what they've saved, and they're just going to keep building up. So, you know, they've brought some equity and some knowledge to the table, and benchmarking your business. I know Bruce said something about, you know, building dairy back up. You know, Queensland Dairy Organisation predicted to me not quite 2 months ago, they thought they would see another 20% drop of dairy farms on the downs before this Christmas. Now, it has rained, but I don't know that that's going to change everything. But on the other hand, you've also got an industry here in Queensland that only 15% of producers benchmark. So, and most of them are in the scenic rim. And so there's some fantastic data for dairy farmers out there to be able to benchmark and to try and improve their productivity. They're dead to it. So being able to benchmark is a great thing. Thankfully, last slide. So we do have a regional team. Kate Dunk is based here in Toowoomba. Kate would love to be here, but she's not thinking about us. She's in Bali. We've got Jen Turner here, who's also based in our Toowoomba office, and it's great to have Jen having to put up with this presentation. Jen's filling in for Kate, but she's also based here as one of our regional assessors, so which is great. So thank you very much for your time, and we're, you know, if there's anything that we can do to assist people making what they want to do a reality, then we're very keen to have a conversation. Thanks very much.